Hi, welcome back to episode 2 of today's 2013 film vlog, and we're going to now move on to swiftly our next film, In the Fog. What I'd say about this one to start off with is anyone who is that bored to actually watch all these reviews that I do may have seen the review a few months ago for what is probably one of the hot contenders so far for my film of the year in Law, when I said that I didn't really think there was that much left to tell about the Second World War and the Nazis and what happened there. And obviously Law came along and has really blown that theory all to hell. And we now come along with this one, In the Fog, which is, well, I'm not really sure where to start with it, to be honest with you. It is effectively another Second World War film. It's set in Eastern Europe during Nazi occupation. And it opens up with quite a brutal scene of these partisans being led through the town square to a gallows to be hung. And we don't actually see the actual hanging itself. Again, as I mentioned in my last review, it takes a really, really good director to look away. And it does seem to be that's what's happened here, is he's chosen to look away. In fact, there's a damn good reason why he chooses to look away, because that will ruin the whole film. But what then transpires is there's these two young revolutionaries who are riding one night through the forest in these tattered and torn clothes. At one point they have to take their horses across this stream, and one of them gets in to walk alongside his horse, and when he gets to the other side, he takes off his boots, and literally he has no socks. His feet are just wrapped in linen strips, which are now absolutely soaked through. And they arrive at this hut, and they knock, and the door is answered by a gentleman called Sushania, and he's just there with his son. And he seems totally unsurprised to see these people here. And, he invites them in and says, you just please sit down, have a drink, and his wife comes along and makes them both food. But all the while there's this cloud hanging over them, and we realise pretty swiftly why this cloud is here. In that, in the opening scenes, we saw this person who we now know is Sushania being taken to his death on the gallows, and for whatever reason, he's not been killed. And it's quite clear that the implication, both for his wife and his former friends and comrades, is that he is a collaborator, and he sold out his friends in exchange for a pardon from the Germans. And we now learn, and indeed Sushania realises very, very swiftly, that these people are here to exact revenge, to show that you don't, in this society, does not accept collaborators, and therefore he has to die for what he did. And there's quite a touching scene where Sushania's wife, she knows exactly what's going to happen, and I don't think she can quite comprehend why it is that Sushania is going out into the night and just docilely complying with this, when he's saying that he didn't do it. He never collaborated, and the fact was that he never did anything at all, and he doesn't know why he was released. And obviously, that's not good enough for the rebels. They're simply convinced that he must have collaborated, otherwise why would he get released? And he can't say why. And so Sushania is taken outside, and he even offers to bring his own shovel in order to dig, presumably, his own grave. And they ride out into the woods, and Sushania is told to start digging his grave. And he complains, saying that basically the ground there is too solid. Can they not go and dig somewhere with a more sandy soil to make it slightly easier? And they acquiesce, and they take him to a sandy clearing. And one of the rebels is sent to act as lookout, and Sashenya is now left with his former friend, and he's there, he's digging his grave. And, he digs it, puts it to one side, and he stands there now, facing his friend, who raises his rifle, ready to kill him. And you can almost even sense from Sashenya that he wants to die, he's ready for this, he's ready to go. But into the clearing ride basically they're Nazi defectors who are now working as guards, and they open fire on Sashenya and his friends. And in the resulting firefight, unfortunately, Sashenya's comrade is hit. And Sashenya, rather than running away, actually protects his friend and drags him away from the fighting. So once the fighting clears, the three of them again meet up. Obviously, Sashenya's friend is now very, very badly hurt from all the shooting. And Sashenya is carrying him the whole way on his back, and they have to find their way to the nearest village. And Sashenya says he knows where it is, but to avoid the troops, it's a long walk. So the rebel that's not been hit says, well, why don't we just leave him here then? Because he's nothing but dead weight, he's going to die, he's clearly mortally wounded. But Sashenya will not leave his friend. And so they walk, and they get to this clearing, and they have a long talk over the night. And this basically is the story of Sashenya's friend and how he became radicalised. And it's quite an interesting story about how he basically, with his own two hands, he built this van, which was then commandeered by the Nazis, and basically he was offered to become part of the Nazi defectors, and offered massive rewards in terms for betraying his fellow men, and but he refuses, and because of his refusal, his van gets stolen. But rather than let them use his van, he goes and places a bomb in the bonnet and blows it up. And so we come back to the clearing now, and that's the reason given to Sashenya as to why they're rebelling and why Sashenya is so evil. And it's realised quite soon that Sashenya cannot carry on carrying his friend. They have to go and get some kind of cart to carry him. And so the other rebel volunteers to go and get it, and leaves Sashenya and his friend in this clearing. And they have another talk, and this time they're telling Sashenya's story and the truth about what actually happened. And Sashenya explains that he was working on a railroad with some other locals, and they were working for the Nazis, and they get a plan between them to remove a few vital struts from the railway, which would derail a German train. And they plan this out, and Shane says, no, we can't do this. This is stupid. I've got a wife and child to support. We have to do this work for them. But the other rebels go ahead and do it anyway, and the train gets derailed, and they get found out, and they get put into prison. And Sashenya is brought forward, and basically he's told that if he agrees to join the Nazis, they will let him go. And he refuses. He says he just can't do it. He can't betray his friends. And the Nazi generals start to see what his friends are reacting to as to why he keeps getting dragged in to see these lead Nazis, even though he's not capitulating, they're questioning more and more and more why it's happening. And Sashania gets treated better and better. And eventually, his friends are sent to their deaths without Sashania. And literally, you come to realise that all he wants is to be killed with his friends. He wants to die. And the Nazis are denying him that. That's the one thing they won't let him do, is they won't let him die. And it's so beautifully observed that this is the truth of it all, and yet it seems so incomprehensible, because there's really no reason why he's being allowed to live, other than the Nazis are punishing him for his failure to help them, because they now know the one thing worse for him than dying is being forced to live when everyone thinks he collaborated in the killing of their colleagues. And indeed, that's what's happened. And you now realise exactly why at the start of the film Sashania was so completely happy to be taken out and shot, and indeed dig his own grave. Because, quite frankly, he wants to die. He knows that no one believes him. And his story, because quite frankly, his story makes no sense. Because there is no logical reason why those Germans would have kept him alive. And no one would understand that what they're doing by keeping him alive is punishing him. And unfortunately, overnight, Sashania's friend dies. And so back comes the other rebel who says, what's happened to him? He's died now. So they decide to move on. And they have to cross the main road. That's the only way out into the next village. And the problem with this main road is that it's patrolled frequently by guards. And during sort of the walk back to Chechnya and the dead comrade, we've learnt the story of the third man in the group, and why he is there and why he does what he does. And we learn that, in fact, in a way, he's a collaborator, because he goes to some friends who give him various pieces of food in a sack, and he's taking this sack of food back with him when he's found by some Nazi guards. And rather than having the convictions and the strength that Chechnya showed to say that he just couldn't help them, he does help them, and he leads them back to this hut with food, and the Nazi guards just storm in and they shoot residents and they steal all the stuff. And he leaves in disgrace, runs away. And you've now got this bizarre role reversal in which the reason why the rebel is treating Chechnya so badly is because he himself is guilty of helping and collaborating with the Nazis, albeit not intentionally, but he did do it. He didn't have the strength to resist them. And the irony is that Chechnya, who did have to resist them, is not denying it, refuses to deny it. And when they come to this road, Chechnya is forced to go over first. And he scuttles over and he makes it. And after him comes the rebel, who unfortunately gets spotted by some Nazi guards who shoot him, and they steal all his stuff. And once again, you've then got Chechnya looking back at this guy who's treated him like absolute filth. He's tried to kill him. He's done nothing to deserve it, and yet Chechnya comes back and helps him and takes him to a hillside where he lays him beside his dead comrade. And Chechnya is now sat amongst his colleagues, his friends, and he realises that there's nothing left, in that there's nothing there for any of them. They can't win because these two are both dead, and Chechnya wants to be dead. There's nothing he wants more than that, because he has nothing left to live for. And even these people who may now believe him, they're dead, so they can't help him. And sort of, as this fog sort of weaves in, you hear, as you sort of see Sushanya pick up a gun, and the fog comes in and slowly obscures the whole screen, and all you hear is a gunshot. And the question you're left as the credits roll is asking yourself, has he killed himself? I mean, in terms of a film, it's certainly not an easy watch. I wouldn't say I loved it in the same way I loved Laura. It was certainly challenging and absolutely heartbreaking at times to watch it and sort of see these three stories intertwined and no one quite understanding what is the truth and what is hidden. The entire film effectively is just shrouded in this fog, because the only time the fog ever seems to lift is when people have died. And it's exceptionally well put together piece of cinema, certainly for those who are interested in the stories of the Second World War and sort of the unknown bits about what happened outside of the main Western Front. It's certainly an interesting view of what happened on the Eastern Front. It's definitely an interesting interpretation of what it means to punish somebody. And the question, is there really such a thing as a fate worse than death? I would say in Tashenya's case, it certainly is a fate worse than death, because this is the one thing that he wants for the whole film, is for someone to kill him. And yet, the whole time, he doesn't seem to have the bravery to do it himself. Now, whether it's that he hasn't got the bravery, or whether it's that he doesn't feel that he deserves the right to kill himself, it has to be somebody else to punish him, even though he didn't do anything wrong. And this is sort of what you're trying to see in the whole film, is why does Shenya feel this way? Why? Is it just that he feels so trapped, or is it that he feels that even though he did resist, he clearly didn't resist enough because his friends were still put to death? And why wasn't he killed alongside them? And it's a beautiful little film. I'd say you'd be doing very, very well to catch it. I think it was certainly on an exceptionally limited release. But if it does sound your kind of thing, it certainly is a good way of spending an evening if you're not averse to being horribly, horribly depressed for a few hours, because it's certainly bleak and it's a very, very small character piece. For most of the film, there's only ever one or perhaps two people on screen at any time, and the cast itself, apart from the supporting sort of Nazi characters, it's basically three of them, and it's just these men talking about what it means and what is the nature of truth and what is the nature of justice. And it's so well done. I mean, it sort of reminded me very much of Dostoevsky's House of the Dead, in terms of sort of the long dark night of the soul, that kind of thing. It's very, very much in the sort of Dostoevsky palette, in that it's people who are wrestling constantly with inner demons and what it means to be alive or dead. And is there really a difference? Can you genuinely be alive when effectively your soul has died? It's certainly, it's a tough watch. It's not what I call entertaining, but it's well worth a watch for you. Fancy it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'll speak to you soon. Ta-ra.